A wizard, witch, they are a wise woman or man, was a god of child sacrifice. It was a fertility god. So that god required child sacrifice. Witches and wizards and warlocks are those that have the best intentions for themselves, their family, and even just for humanity. They're not even trying to harm other people. They just want to live. Forms of enchanting. If you watching TV, Medea, the goddess Medea, over media, you're being enchanted. You've already been enchanted. People believe the television. Just like magic, I'm attracted. I get everything I want 'cause I attract you. Hello everyone, welcome to the School of Biblical Divination and Magic. I am Minister Ashley. I'm your favorite biblical researcher, decoder, teacher, and Christian witch. All right, so I'm going to dive into some of these comments that I have been reading over the past couple of weeks on my videos as well as in the community post. So this is the YouTube edition. I will have another edition for Instagram and TikTok. You can follow me on those platforms as well. All right, so let's get into it. So this person left a comment on a video that I posted earlier, or short that I posted earlier this year. The name of that short is Divination Was Common in Godly Practice. 4 days ago, a couple days ago, they left the comment, and it's from SkyCat777U.K5. They left two scriptures, 2 Kings 17:17 and Deuteronomy 18:10. So you guys know that I have addressed Deuteronomy 18:10, and I'm going to dive into the scripture of 2 Kings 17:17. So whenever you are decoding a scripture, you want to dive into the full chapter, a little historical background about the chapter. So you know how here you may have the whole book of Kings, and they have them divided up. So you have 2 Kings, so 1st King and then 2nd Kings, that is divided. That's one division. But then you have even further divisions, and you have the sections. So you may have 2nd Kings 1, 2, etc. It did to help break up the scriptures to make it easier for people to remember small quotes, okay? And they can pull from those quotes and use them how the way they see fit. And we can see this universally, how people will take one little phrase and they will amplify that one and use it over and over again, but they miss the overall picture. So I always recommend that you go back and you look at least over the chapter, so just over 17, the entire chapter, but I'm not going to do that for the sake of time. So here I'm just going to read just the scripture, okay? So 2 Kings 17:17. This is the one that the person commented. They left that scripture. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. I mentioned this in the book. What was happening here? These were sacrifices, child sacrifices to the god Moloch, depending on how you pronounce it. So that god was a god of child sacrifice. It was a fertility god. So that god required child sacrifice. So the child's age could be anywhere from a newborn, even with the woman still being pregnant. If you look at some of the ancient practices, when they would have these festivals, and some of these festivals, the origins of them are in our Gregorian calendar, around Easter, around that time, April, May, like around the springtime, the fertility gods were worshipped. And so this was one of the practices, whether it be practices that are dealing with fertility, from grape sacrificing of a pregnant woman or taking the baby out of the pregnant woman, all the way to sacrificing of a newborn to someone's child. And the child could be up to like about 30 years old. A person was still considered to be a child up to like about 30. The practice of sacrificing the child to the god and grant for fertility. It sounds weird, right? But another part of that fertility is also for the harvest. So if the crops weren't producing, that by sacrificing one's child, and it typically was some form of blood sacrifice, and then in some instances they would burn the sacrifice afterwards, and they would have like a bonfire. You know, sometimes around that time, you will have bonfires, and also on the opposite end, which will be harvest time, they have bonfires to celebrate like the sacrifices. So you sow seeds in like the springtime, and you reap the harvest in fall time. So these are the equinoxes here, okay? And what happens is that when the fertility, the sacrifice represents the seed being planted. It also could involve, I'm not trying to be crass, but I'm just giving historical references. It could involve also menses. You get what I'm saying? And that overflow, I'm just going to leave it like that. And doing various things with that, because it represents fertility. What do they call a child? Like a seed. Oh, that's my seed. The people that were practicing these practices, they would they would sacrifice their seed by offering up their child and then burning and passing through the fire. So some of these practices I'm going to explain. I have some of these practices listed in my book in the Bible's Hidden Divination and Magic. Okay, so in 2 Kings, some of these kings were practicing these practices so they could build their kingdom, so they could be blessed by this God that they had to see with their physical eyes. And at times they would offer up their children. Even the priests would offer up their children. You can see this form of scripture about don't allow your child to pass through the fire in some of the other texts like Deuteronomy, Leviticus. And one of the practices what they would do is also have like a competition, such as you would have the children line up and they would pass through a fire. The pass through the fire, part of purification practice, but also to a game that they would play where whoever survives is the victor. Okay, so that passing the fire is more entailed. This is reference for these specific practices unto these gods. So they sacrifice their sons and daughters. We already talked about that in the fire. They practice divination and sought omens. So with divination, as if you have my book, you will know that there are so many forms of divination. There are at least 50 forms of divination, at least. And I'm pretty sure it's probably more than that as I continue to research. So when we talk about divination, we have to figure out what type of divination, because not all practices of divination were condemned by the God of the Bible. Okay, so if we look at the previous statement about sons and daughters and pass through the fire, and we know about the historical references of the traditions and the rituals that they were practiced during that time, that this form of divination could embody many forms of divination. So if we go to the original text, which I don't have access to, I'm pretty sure I have read this over in hours and hours of research, but this specific scripture I cannot exactly locate at this very moment, because there are different types of divination. So I'm guessing that if they are sacrificing their children and it does involve fire, that there could be some form of pyromancy, but it also could be reading and interpreting the flame or the ashes, or interpretation of the bones after they have been burnt. I mean, there's so many type of divination they were using. Now, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm trying to pinpoint, because people will group every form of divination together. And we already know that the high priests and the prophets and many other people in the Bible practice divination and under the tutelage of God. So they sought their own omens. So omens here on page 46 of my book. I have here omens are signs that carry a general meaning, such as seeing the number 1111 as either lucky or unlucky. However, these meanings can vary for different people, or depending on the occasion. Relying solely on all omens can potentially replace the need to ask God for guidance. And that's one thing. Now, in regards of the Bible, and even with your practice, you could ask, you could pray, you could seek. what does this mean for me? For example, I'm just going to use the number 1111. What does that mean for me specifically? I understand what it may mean for other people, but what does it mean for specifically for me, God? And you could pray and seek, and that can be an omen of no, that's a no, or either it could be an omen of yes, that's a green light. It becomes the person's responsibility to seek after God to know what is the omen and what is the meaning of that omen. Because for some people, snakes represent a death. It represents something to be afraid of. For other people, it represents transformation and rebirth. So that's why it's important to form your own relationship with God. Okay, so with this scripture overall, it's not just talking about just sacrifice, but throughout these other scripture, all the scriptures pretty much are saying the main objective is to form your own relationship for you to be a spiritual practitioner. You're a spirit on a human journey, so you have to also tap into your spiritual faculties. Everyone has spiritual gifts, but it's up to us to find out what those spiritual gifts and how to harness and strengthen them. When we practice divination, we're us practitioners, we're not sacrificing our child. We're not sacrificing our children. That was a ritual that had evil intent. When we are practicing, we do not have evil. From what I practice and what I have noticed generally, most people are not trying to harm other people. They're trying to master themselves, and that's the whole point. So these omens, divination, and sacrifices, these are all in this scripture are things to harm other people. Okay, going on to the next scripture, which they have listed, Deuteronomy 18:10, which is pretty much an echo of the same thing that was said in the previous scripture. It reads in this translation, it's just a regular basic King James translation. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, and useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch. Woo-wee. Okay, so let's go here. We're going to enchanters and charms. Okay, so we already discussed about passing through the fire. This is the same, pretty much the same practice, everything that I said previous with passing through the fire. And use divination. So once again, it could be a myriad of forms of divination, and an observer of times. So that is one that I explained this in the book. So yeah, it's good to observe times. Like you can see patterns. We know that if we have summer, that we're going to eventually have fall, and then we're going to have winter, and then spring. We already know those are just natural cycles. But with this observer of times, this is someone that observes life patterns, and they make a they say, thus saith the Lord, or this is what God is saying, based off of observations. And it's not exactly what God is saying, because God is the author of all things. So therefore things can change and not be the same. So it's not, they're pretty much being a false prophet. An enchanter, so enchantment. Enchantment, that's like, there's different forms of enchanting. If you watching TV, Medea, the goddess Medea, over media, you're being enchanted. You've already been enchanted. People believe the television. So it's pretty much someone that can, let's say that a person has heard from God, like this is what God, thus saith God, thus saith the Lord. And they know, okay, because they recognize the voice of God, but they allow someone else to come and enchant them to not believe, because they're so charming. Okay. And last, a witch. Okay, so that has been added in since the King James interpretation, but witch, the T and the Z are interchangeable when it comes to witch or wizard. So wiz and wit is wisdom. Okay, wizard, witch, they are a wise woman or man. And the wisdom overall that comes from God, but it also comes from using different tools such as divination. Divination is a God practice. And the last video I went over this, but I will go over it again in the introduction of my book. I go over what divination is. And I actually have a video on here, a live video about divination. It's indicative in the word. The root word of divination comes from the Latin word divinatio. It derives from divinus, meaning divine or pertaining to God. Okay, if we understand that this is pertaining to God, God gives us physical reminders, physical signs and synchronicities, so we know that we are on the path. Being that we are a spirit, we are a soul on a physical journey, we have to pair the spiritual with the physical. Okay, and that's how we know that we are on the right path. Eventually, what is in the spirit, in the imagination, in the invisible realms, will have to solidify in the physical. Okay, and so that is what divination is. It helps us to divide truth from falsity, what is meant for us and what is not meant for us. Okay, and that's what divination is in short. But you can uncover the full definition in my book, or either you can go to that video where I go into a little more depth. So it's the art of dividing what God is telling you. And it's like a scavenger hunt. It's actually pretty fun. Sometimes it can be frustrating, when you are praying, you're asking God, tell me what's up. It's to exercise our faith. So that is what divination is. And if you're going to a doctor, they're practicing divination. Okay. If you go through my book, I go through some of the medical techniques that they use that had the origins in divination. I have another comment here from Kings of Rhythm. And they state that it is not sacred. It's not sacred. Give a verse saying it's sacred. It's condemned. Deuteronomy 18:9-12. AV. God doing and asking spirits to do something are different, and you are not God. You are a witch and condemned. All right, so this person left another comment that I addressed on my other channel, and it's on the video that I posted earlier this year. Many people don't know this divination in the Bible. So let's go into it. Let's just dive into it. So we have 18:9-12. When you enter the land of the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nation. Okay, so the detestable ways says people that have taken the ancient practices from other religions, such as the Canaanites, and they have incorporated it into their beliefs. Now, overall, there's a lot of good material in the Bible and in other sacred texts. It's not for us to get caught up on the little nuances. Okay, it's overall bigger picture is that God, an infinite source, is using different modalities to explain the same thing. Okay, but I just need to point that out for those that are traditionalists that like to, leave comments like this. Okay, so it says you're God doing and asking spirits to do something are different. God doing something, which God is always doing something through us, through nature, through everything, and asking spirits to do things, spirits, energies, to do something are different. You are not God, and nor are you God. Okay, none of us are God. We have God that resides in us, a fraction of God, but we're not overall a God. I am a witch. You're daggone right, I'm a witch, but I'm not condemned. Anytime that someone tries to send condemnation your way, return to sender. Okay, I have videos here about return to senders. Send that right on back. Like people that want to pray, I have a video about prayer and protecting your energy. But people that trying to condemn, really, and you talk about the God of the Bible, but you want to condemn somebody else. One other point about a witch. The word witch was not understood to be what it is nowadays. Okay, there were different brackets of workers, practitioners, and you had those that were charmers. You had those that were conjurers, those that were for defense, those that were vocalists, those that use breath, and what we now would call ventriloquists, that spoke from the gut. There were many brackets: astrologers, astronomers, alchemists. There so many brackets of individuals that were grouped together with the word witch. And the reason why they use the word witch is to try to control the narrative of people that are willing to step out and research using their own personal wisdom and their wit and using their own energy to craft a life that is desirable for them. And most of these people that categorize themselves, whether consciously or unconsciously, as witches and wizards and warlocks, are those that have the best intentions for themselves, their family, and even just for humanity. They're not even trying to harm other people. They just want to live. And through these witch trials, what was the main target? Women. And women were the ones that carried and birthed the next nation, the next generation of people, their clan, handing down the traditions. The children stuck with the women, and they would tell stories. They would share their wisdom. But if that wit is cut off, that wisdom is cut off, then they can control the narrative and control the population. And that's the reason why people are so afraid of witches to this day, because of the wisdom. They took the wisdom of herbs, natural healing, of storytelling. They took that wisdom and they use it for evil, and they condemned those that were here to heal. Okay, and we have to understand that. So that word witch, and then added and condemned. How do you have power to condemn someone? And if you did have the heart of Christ, as most people really honestly do have like a heart, it's Christ-like. Okay, but then you have people that want to condemn other people, but they're supposed to be Christians, Christ-like. Man, get out of here. Anyways, you guys, you can go check out my other channel, FD1111 Ministries. Don't forget the I Am That I Am Divine Guidance cards. These are 45 watercolor cards with scriptures, I am statements, and other little messages. And then I have my latest book, The Bible's Hidden Divination and Magic. Both of those are currently on TikTok, Instagram, and my and my Etsy shop. And the book is on Amazon. All right, you guys. Yeah, I think that is it. If you have any comments that you want to share, then you can leave those comments down below. Go check out the other posts, my other channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Follow me on my other platforms too. All right, peace.